Welcome to section 8.1 of immunology. In this section, we'll be helping you memorize the cytokines released from macrophages and dendritic cells. This table is all about macrophages and dendritic cells, or rather, the cytokines that are released from them. You can also see the function of each one of these cytokines. There's no sense in reading this to you since I'm about to help you memorize all of these details in the video anyways, but you may want to use this table for your reference, which can be found in your text. This story takes place outside of a pound where several dogs can be seen escaping from their cages into the night. Let's zoom in to take a closer look. You can see those cages that they escaped from. And remember that cages are our recurring symbol for macrophages. So cages, macrophages. Now notice that one of the dogs immediately begins marking his territory by peeing. If you look, you will see that the pee puddle looks very much like a dendritic cell. The spotlight in this scene is to draw your attention to the pee puddle or dendritic cell and the cages, or macrophages, which this story will focus on. Now during the great dog escape, a particularly wild dog manages to smash into this little fireworks stand, setting off a bunch of the fireworks. The name of this stand is TNT. Remember that TNT is our recurring symbol for TNF, or TNF-alpha. So this should help you remember that macrophages and dendritic cells release TNF. On the corner, we can see a prostitute setting up shop for the night. Prostitutes are our recurring symbol for prostaglandins, and those TNT explosions from the fireworks stand are terrifying this prostitute, causing her to run away. Now tying these ideas together should help you remember that TNF increases prostaglandin production. Now this fireworks stand is owned and operated by a very old man. The old man is as thin as a rail and very sickly and cachectic looking, which is that wasting away appearance cancer patients can get. Anyways, that cachectic old man is wearing a pink cancer hope ribbon, which is our recurring symbol for cancer. So this man represents cancer-induced cachexia. And the fact that this cachectic old man manages the TNT stand should help you remember that it's TNF-alpha that causes cachexia in cancer. Now this old man manages the fireworks stand with his wife. And with all of this ruckus and fireworks going off, he decided to shield her from it. So he grabbed this old grandma in an effort to protect her from the firework Armageddon. Grandmas like this are our symbol for granulomas. So this should help you remember that TNF maintains granulomas. This is a rough part of town, and this kind of chaos actually happens all the time here, which is why the old couple have installed security cameras nearby to help keep track of damages. Notice these two cameras above the stand labeled VCAM and ICAM. These cameras watching the TNT stand should help you remember that TNF upregulates ICAM and VCAM. As you may recall from earlier in this chapter, ICAM and VCAM help neutrophils enter the inflamed tissue. But all you need to know right here is that macrophages and dendritic cells release TNF-alpha, which upregulate ICAM and VCAM. It looks like Eric the bounty hunter has shown up to the party. As you might imagine, he's a regular in this area since most of his targets are felons that frequent these parts. After all, this area is visited by prostitutes. In any case, this visit isn't about business. He's here to find himself a new dog. As he is deciding which dog to select, a brick of TNT is launched at him from the nearby explosion. But without even flinching, Eric catches the brick of TNT right before it hits him in the side of the head. Notice how completely unconcerned Eric is about the brick of TNT. He isn't even looking at it. Right now, Eric is too focused on selecting a dog, and we'll introduce that dog that he's pointing to a little later. Anyways, the E in Eric represents the E in E-selectin. And the fact that Eric is selecting a new dog should help tie together the selectin part. So bringing it all together now, Eric selecting a new dog while unconcernedly catching the TNT should help you remember that TNF upregulates E-selectin. Now the TNT sells pre-assembled firework kits in white nets. Remember that white nets like this, with the little knots, are our recurring symbol for lymph nodes and lymphatics. And the explosions at the stand knock one of these bags to the ground, and one of the escaped dogs immediately starts peeing on it. The pee puddle on the lymph net full of TNT looks like a dendritic cell, so this should help you remember that TNF stimulates dendritic cells to enter lymph channels. Now there's a flooring installer over here working on the interlocking floors for an outdoor basketball court right near the pound. Remember that interlocking panels like these are our recurring symbols for interleukins. The flooring installer on his break can be seen sitting on a stack of the flooring planks. It's midnight, so the worker's watch is prominently displaying a huge 12 on it. Just like 12 noon signifies the lunch break of most daytime workers, 12 midnight signifies this night shift worker's lunch break. Anyways, interlocking tiles represents interleukins, and the 12 represents interleukin 12 specifically, or IL-12. And as you can see, one of those crazy dogs is very interested in what this worker is eating. So this area of the story should help you remember that macrophages and dendritic cells release interleukin 12. Remember how we said that this was a rough part of town? Now notice that there's a serial killer, and he can be seen sneaking up on the unsuspecting flooring installer. But fortunately for this installer, he just fed this white dog some food, making the dog fiercely loyal. And seeing his new master is being approached by a killer, the dog barks, causing the killer to whip out his knife and stand defensively, almost like this killer is getting activated. This man represents natural killer cells, and the IL-12 causing this guy to be activated represents how IL-12 can activate natural killer cells. One of the pound workers wearing a distinctive helper shirt has come outside near the stack of interlocking floor planks to try to get things under control, but a nearby dog immediately turns and starts to bark her back into the building. She is holding out a single pointer finger and signaling the dog to stay so that she can get back inside safely. So this worker represents type 1 T helper cells, or Th1 cells. And the fact that this dog barked, causing the worker to whip around so furiously and actively, should help you remember that IL-12 activates T helper 1 cells. Now it looks like one of the dogs has slipped on a single interlocking floor plank and is now racing down the hill on it. This is a pretty scary, unexpected thing to happen, as you can tell by that expression on the dog's face. Now this uncaged dog racing down the hill on a single interlocking plank should help you remember that macrophages and dendritic cells release interleukin 1, or IL-1. One of the fleeing prostitutes happens to cross the path of the sledding dog, which hits her, knocking her into the air. This is to help you remember that IL-1 can stimulate prostaglandin production, just like TNF. A cameraman from a local news station is on the scene to capture some of the chaos of the pound escape. Notice that his camera has CAM written on it. Trying to avoid that single interlocking plank barreling down the hill, this man jumped out of the way. So this cam represents the ICAM and VCAM, just like the ICAM and VCAM up by the TNT stand. So this should help you remember that IL-1 upregulates ICAM and VCAM on endothelial cells. Now another member of the news crew wearing a shirt that reads TH17 on the back of it can be seen nearby ringing a bell to warn the cameraman about the oncoming sled dog. In our stories, we always have TH17 represented as someone ringing a bell like this. Anyways, the fact that the single interlocking plank causing this TH17 man to ring his bell so wildly should help you remember that IL-1 activates TH17 cells. Notice that Eric the bounty hunter is pointing at the sledding dog. He's pretty impressed with the dog's energy, so Eric is selecting him to be his new canine companion. Eric selecting the dog that is sledding on the single interlocking plank should help you remember that interleukin 1 upregulates E-selectin. So as a recap, we now know of two things that can upregulate E-selectin, TNF and IL-1. Now kids in this neighborhood don't get much adult supervision, so upon hearing all the ruckus in the area, this little kid rushed over here all dressed up like a cowboy and immediately commandeered a wild dog to ride like a horse. And if you look carefully, this little cowboy completes his costume with a toy 6-shooter cap gun. And it looks like many of the interlocking planks have fallen down this hill already, because there's a growing stack of them at the bottom. Anyways, these interlocking planks represent interleukins, and the 6-shooter cowboy plowing into this pile of interlocking planks represents the fact that macrophages and dendritic cells release interleukin 6. Now this cowboy kid had a second 6-shooter, but when it ran out of ammo, he aggressively threw it at a nearby Traeger grill, damaging the grill badly. You can even see it falling on the ground. Remember that Traeger grills are our symbol for T-reg cells, and the fact that it has this crack in it and is severely damaged and falling to the ground represents that it's downregulated. So tying these ideas together should help you remember that IL-6 downregulates T-reg cells. Now the cowboy kid isn't too fond of the nearby bell ringer with the TH17 shirt. The kid doesn't have anything personal against this bell ringer. He's just playing make-believe and likes to have villains in his head. You need villains to shoot out after all. That is, if you're pretending to be a good guy. Anyways, he aims his 6-shooter at this guy and gets ready to fire. Cap guns aren't supposed to fire like that, but I guess this one did. Malfunctioned a little bit. And the bell ringer is hurt by this, but he never stops dutifully ringing his bell. So this should help you remember that IL-6 activates TH17 cells. Now when the cowboy kid pulled that trigger of the 6-shooter, again, which shouldn't have shot at the guy, the cap gun caught on fire. This fire represents fever, to help you remember that IL-6 can cause fever. Now the cowboy kid's companion also wields 6-shooters, and you can now see him riding on a dog of his own just a little ways away. He doesn't seem to have much control of the dog that he's riding, so trying to stop himself, he grabs onto the shirt of a nearby muscular man, tearing the muscle guy's shirt. Notice that this beautiful muscular man has the cutest, most sparkly blue eyes that you've probably ever seen. Those cute eyes should make you think of the word acute. This cute man is holding a chicken thigh which he was about to place on that Traeger grill, which, as we saw, was already destroyed. Anyways, that protein-filled chicken thigh represents protein. So the acute man with the protein represents acute phase proteins. These are sometimes called acute phase reactants. And the fact that this 6-shooter kid ripped this guy's shirt, releasing the cute body beneath, should help you remember that IL-6 increases the release of acute phase proteins. Near all the commotion with the blue-eyed beauty, there's a girl standing on a walkway made of interlocking wooden planks. Just now, she was asking her magic 8-ball if she would ever find a boyfriend. When she saw the delicious blue-eyed bodybuilder, she became instantly mesmerized, dropping the magic 8-ball. This should help you remember that macrophages and dendritic cells release IL-8. Now the dropped magic 8-ball can now be seen rolling across the ground and scattering a group of turtles, sending them back into the ocean for safety. If you look at the turtle shells, you'll notice they have the purple color of a neutrophil, and you can also see that multilobular appearance of those purple markings on the shell, resembling the multilobular nuclei in neutrophils. And the fact that they're moving so swiftly represents chemotaxis. So bringing these ideas together should help you remember that interleukin-8 stimulates neutrophil chemotaxis. And that should be all you need to know about the cytokines released from macrophages and dendritic cells.